Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs, which I will henceforth refer to as Ice Age 3, is a video game that was released mainly on 7th generation consoles in the Southern Hemisphere winter of 2009, based on the movie of the same name which was newly in cinemas around this time. According to Wikipedia, the video game was released prior to the movie by as much as half a week in Europe and nearly an entire week in the Australian region. Maybe people were so desperate to play this game that someone broke Street Date. I myself was certainly interested in the sequel to the critically acclaimed masterpiece from 3 years earlier, Ice Age 2: The Meltdown, the video game, released for the Sony PlayStation 2 in 2006, although I did not receive my copy of Ice Age 3 until Christmas Day of 2009. As of the date that this video is uploaded, it has been 15 years since the fateful day in which I unwrapped the present that contained my first copy of this game. This is also not the first video uploaded on specifically Christmas Day that happens to be about an Ice Age video game.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
This video is less of a review of the Ice Age 3 game, rather than an opportunity for myself to talk about one of my childhood games as much as I would like, which, judging by the runtime of this video, means that I have a lot to say. I will not, however, be mentioning the DS game, as I do not have any experience with it. As the game begins, you're met with a unique short loading screen. Following this is a language selection backed by a new music track that I believe would not appear outside of this game. I say new because a lot of the game's music tracks happen to be repurposed from the Ice Age 2 console video game, and I expect to be mentioning the soundtrack for this game a fair bit. To cross-reference the Wikipedia article for the game, with the credits roll accessible from the main menu, Jim Croft and Steve Duckworth are the people who are responsible for composing the tracks within this game. However, the former is only listed here because of his work on Ice Age 2. Therefore, it will be more appropriate to say that Steve Duckworth created the music that is unique to this game. Steve is also credited as helping with audio production in Ice Age 2. The next thing to appear on screen is, in fact, one of the teaser trailers made for the movie wherein a dinosaur introduces itself to Scrat once he falls through the ice. I watched the movie for the first time in more than a decade in the process of creating this video, and this is not how Scrat canonically enters the underground world. I call false advertising. Following the mammalian mischief is the demo reel for the game, not particularly worth rewatching the trailer for, as an eager kid on Christmas Day would rather mash the X button to get to the actual game, though it serves as some good background footage to use myself. It also once again uses what may as well be the main theme for the game, which I consider to be a medley of sorts. Not very much is accessible on the main menu upon loading up the game for the first time, so you may as well hit Start New Story and jump right into the action. Little did we know that Start New Story is meant to be interpreted literally. The plot of the video game is a recounting of previous events in the context of telling Peaches, the baby mammoth, a bedtime story. Sid and Diego are the characters who are mainly heard speaking in these segments, though this game has no subtitle option to speak of, whilst Ice Age 2 does. The game features quite a lot of voice acting, so it is notable that only Crash, Diego and Buck required replacement actors. I'm far too used to the video game to think that the voice acting is quote-unquote bad, but at least this is not Madagascar. The music here is from the Sloth Village 3 level in Ice Age 2. In the first level of the game, Sid's early start, the titular character is woken up by Crash and Eddie as they have been instructed by Manny to collect crystals for Ellie. One such crystal appears in the actual movie, which really surprised me upon my rewatch. These crystals serve as the main collectible for the game, with every level in the game containing 3 of them. Though there is a finite amount, additional crystals can be obtained elsewhere, and these will all contribute to the extras page on the main menu. By the end of a 100% playthrough, Ellie is fortunate to receive this many baby gifts. Continuing with the first level, the player will take control of Sid. The tutorial is provided to the player as they progress, although there is little that needs to be explained aside from the standard fare of jumping, attacking, camera movement, interacting with the world, aiming with throwable objects, and so on. Tutorials are mainly in the form of on-screen pop-ups, requiring the player to execute a button prompt or complete a specified action. I am, of course, immediately reminded of Ice Age 2, and not just because of the water park track that plays here. Aside from the crystals, all of which are mandatory in the first level due to being collected as part of the plot, the player can also collect cherries, either on the ground, in breakable objects, or by performing a ground pound within a circle of rocks, wherein the rocks each become apples, which are worth 5 cherries each. Pairs are found later and are worth 50 cherries. Cherries are the sole currency of the game, as Fast Tony's Trade Shack, in the form of a rock that the player can interact with, is introduced partway into the first level as the place for the cherries to be exchanged for various unlockable bonuses. The music that plays here is the same as in Ice Age 2's Penguin Bowling, which is fascinating as that is the only place for Fast Tony to appear in that game. Something like that must be intentional, and I am the sort of person to take notice of it. Within the Trade Shack, fun items are represented by the star icons. I recommend purchasing chunky cherries and colossal crystals as soon as possible, as the game is generally smoother to play when the pickup range of the items that these bonuses apply to is significantly increased. 2 more are presently available within the shop, with Fisheye Lens increasing the FOV of the game, and Big Projectiles increasing the size of projectiles. It is possible that Big Projectiles increases the hitbox of the thrown item as well, although I am unable to confirm this. Health and ammo capacity upgrades as well as multiplayer minigames can also be unlocked at this time. Upon exiting the shop, the effect of chunky cherries is immediately apparent in the following cutscene. All fun items purchased will be automatically enabled, in fact, but the unlock for crystals is inconsequential in this level, only as the player is forced to collect them. No, it is not possible to beat Ice Age 3 without collecting any crystals, or cherries for that matter.
Should we do anything? You'll be fine.
In obtaining the 3rd crystal, its size also unaffected, the player is introduced to using projectiles as a means to attack enemies. Snowballs are not uncommon throwable items for a subarctic setting, however Sid will not retain them after this level. The last remaining fun item thus far is now applicable, that being Big Projectiles. The 5th fun item is not accessible to Sid. I find that there is little to no reason to disable any of the fun items aside from the one which modifies the FOV. There is something to be said about how reliable hitting locked-on enemies while strafing is in this game. When we get the 5th fun item, then its usefulness will be even more applicable. The player is shown the first level completed screen, which will always display the amount of crystals collected thus far. There is space for 80 of them in the array shown there, and we will be getting all of them. The Softbridge 2 theme can be heard here, and it is a peaceful theme considering that it precedes several lava-themed levels. It does take some time for the levels in the game to align with or reflect what is supposed to be happening in the movie. At some point before midday,
This is what happens when I wake up before noon.
Sid is tasked by Manny to baby-proof the area, and this requires the player to
Head those sharp, eye-poking-out rocks with leaves. Put mud on those sharp rocks over there. Melt the sharp icicles in the cave.
From this point onwards, the player is also able to notice the effects of colossal crystals if it has been enabled. They sound like pizza tower when you pick them up. As Sid is required to throw mud on the rocks, he loses the snow projectiles he had in the previous level. This makes no difference to the gameplay itself, it is just amusing for me to note because there is very much still snow here. Within the cave, the icebox containing the cherries can be melted just the same as the sharp icicles by holding down triangle or the equivalent button. This can also be done in the next Sid level. Aside from the new baby proofing theme, 2 other pieces of music are possible to play here, and both are from Ice Age 2. One of them is from Slothbridge 1, as Scrat is participating in a digging minigame with Crash and Eddie, and the other is from Forest 2, as Scrat is returning some baby birds to their nest. As the former is for a minigame, it may not even be possible to hear the full piece in the original game, which makes the inclusion of this sort of thing notable. Once all objectives have been completed, Manny will be playable for a short while, with the theme playing being another piece of music that is also present in Forest 2, though it has its pitch and speed modified. Manny's task here is to pull up some tree stumps
Not now, Sid. I'm busy clearing this path.
while being hassled by beavers. I mean, the same beavers are present in Forest 2. Carl and Frank then show up to crash the party, and the player is required to use them to break some large rocks in this circular fenced-off area, either by directly luring them to crash into the rocks, or by getting them to crash into a wall, which will stun them, at which point they can be mounted and made to charge into the rocks. It's worth mentioning that Sid is not required to fight Carl and Frank themselves, although Scrap might have to. The last crystal can be collected in this area, although it can only be picked up on foot by Sid as Manny is unable to climb or jump. The level then ends. Introducing another member of the Herd, Diego is the playable character in the 3rd level, pursuing the gazelle within a non-branching and curving faux racetrack, jumping over short rivers, power sliding around corners, and avoiding the other Herd animals also stuck in this racetrack for some reason. The 3 crystals within this level can only be accessed if the player intentionally delays catching the gazelle up until there is 15 seconds remaining, at which point it is quite easy to fail to catch the gazelle. Pineapples are collectible within this level only, serving as a brief speed boost for Diego. Diego the saber-toothed tiger will not be playable again. For the cutscenes in this game, even when they resemble a similar scene from the movie, the game opts to create something as a substitute that is wholly original. It probably helps for copyright, as well as for game immersion, because these recreated cutscenes are graphically just the same as the rest of the game. Lines that are spoken from the movie may also be re-recorded by the same voice actor which initially said that line.
Sid, give them to her! She's their mother!
How do I know she's their mother?
What do you want, a birth certificate? She's a dinosaur! Sid, give them back to her! She's their mother!
How do I know she's their mother?
What do you want, a birth certificate? She's a dinosaur!
Following his rejection, Sid is the first to fall through the ice, down into a cave where the next level will take place. His projectile is now pine cones, different again to each of the 2 previous levels, although the icon for Sid to upgrade his ammo in the trade shack is always a pine cone. Sid is required to hold a lit torch when progressing to the dark tunnels of the cave, or else he will run out of the tunnel screaming. As seen in part of Sid's early start, spiders can be encountered in this cave which sound the same as the visually distinct spiders in Ice Age 2, which sound the same as some monkeys in the 6th season of the X-Files. Poison and direct attacks will damage Sid's health, as will being wrapped up in a web if the player fails to escape. The player can wiggle free from this by moving the control stick back and forth, however. Sid will proceed through the cave and light campfires to act as checkpoints, so that the fire can be relit without having to backtrack a far distance. Campfires are also present within darker areas of the cave as they require Sid to be holding his torch to access, although the player will not respawn at these checkpoints if they lose their fire due to the blowing wind. 2 of the crystals in this level are located within these campfire rooms, and the 3rd is up on a ledge near the beginning. The fire is also needed to burn cobwebs to block the path which the player is supposed to travel through. This is a mechanic that the player is introduced to in the first level of the game, which is also coincidentally near to where that level's spiders are found. The cobwebs will not need to be burnt again after this level. Near to the end of Lonesome Sloth, in the corner of a room which you revisit after gaining access to some rocky platforms high above the ground, there is some sort of collectible that is visible through the ceiling, briefly appearing into view as it spins. I need boundary break to get on this one, because I don't know what it is and I want to find out. The level culminates with Sid ascending a circular room in order to reach higher ground so that he can leave the cave, where yet another theme from Ice Age 2 can be heard. In that game, this theme plays while Scrat is ascending a circular room in order to reach higher ground so that he can leave the cave. Mind you, he is also attempting to save Sid at this time. In the custom cutscene that follows this level, Sid will find the dinosaur eggs and attempt to retrieve them from where they are currently located. Egg Roll, which is quite possibly the tastiest sounding level name in this game, is what the player will go through next. It is the introduction to ball rolling levels, which this game has less than 2 of. After the beginning of level cutscene, which showcases 2 more pieces of music from Ice Age 2, Sid can be seen standing on top of a large snowball, of which is presumably containing one of the 3 dinosaur eggs. The player is unable to get off of the snowball, and Sid will take fatal fall damage quite easily, although this may better be understood as the egg within the snowball cracking from the force of gravity. This means that shortcuts are generally unwise to take. The egg, or Sid, can also be hurt by slamming into rocks if the snowball has accumulated too much speed. Fallen trees are a common obstacle which the player is required to jump over, and it is possible to take damage as the tree breaks even if the snowball is moving at little to no speed. A theme from Ice Age 2 can again be heard in this level. This time it is from Eviscerator, which is an auto-scroller where the player is again controlling Sid as he slides down a big icy slide. I have to wonder why a dinosaur skeleton is here even during the second movie. There are short sections where the player must fight dodos, who are also rolling around on a rock of their own, but these are painfully easy as the bird can be baited to attempt to hit the player and will roll itself off the edge instead. I wonder how the Dutch feel about this. As there are 3 different courses in this level, 1 for each of the eggs to be transported, 1 crystal is collectible per course. If the player does not already know where to look, Colossal Crystals helps a lot in this regard, as the camera is zoomed out quite a lot in addition to being from a fixed perspective. At the end of this level, there is some music which plays briefly, only ever heard once during gameplay, which is quite sad because I like how it sounds and it takes a while to get back to this part of the level. Sid is swiftly met with the consequences of his actions as the mother of the eggs which he has collected ends up chasing after him. In the beginning of level cutscene, I find it quite interesting that the crystal here is not allowed to be broken due to its status as a collectible, even though the same crystal in the movie gets damaged at this point in the story. An auto-scroller segment ensues with a fixed perspective once again where Sid is running towards the camera, and the player must avoid the dinosaur behind Sid, and the pitfalls, piranha ponds and porcupines ahead of him. The crystals will be collected easily enough if the player remains in the middle of the track, although it is necessary to dodge the attacks from Mama with the use of triangle and a direction on the control stick. The level will end after the patch of ice returns to dirt. The music here is the same as when Scrat is fighting the giant spider in Mudbug 4, which is probably intense enough when a ground sloth is being chased by a tyrannosaurid. Speaking of him, we will now finally be able to play as the Scrat creature. Not spelled Scrate. How do I pronounce it?
Oh yeah, this is the other. What's her name?
Scratay.
Scratay.
Yeah.
Well, it's the first of 3 Scrat-centric levels in Ice Age 3. All of them function like side-scrollers, with nothing to do except to travel from the left side of the level to the right, picking up the crystals along the way if the player chooses to do so. The circles of rocks on the ground grant a pair instead of several apples upon executing a ground pound. Sometimes, crystals will only be visible after ground pounding a nearby switch in the floor, and since Scrat is relatively quite a small character, the crystals and their pickup ranges happen to be very large. They may also be collected throughout the level without necessarily activating something though. Beetle enemies appear, the same as in Ice Age 2, although Scrat is able to defeat them here, while in the previous game they could only be momentarily stunned. The Fast Tony statue is not accessible for Scrat throughout any of his 3 levels, which means that even though he is a recurring playable character, it is not possible to upgrade his health or weapon capacities. There are no walls to climb. Scrat will simply jump onto and around visible platforms, bouncing on enemies and mushrooms like Bing Bing Wahoo himself until the end of the level is reached. I appreciate that this level serves as a visible transition from the above world to the underground realm of the dinosaurs, with the cold, icy appearance of the cave becoming rich with plant life where sunlight starts peeking through the walls. Also, the music is pretty good. We will say farewell to Scrat for now, but he shall return. A cutscene from the movie does actually play here. It is from when the herd, who is on the search for their kidnapped friend, steps into the underground dinosaur world for the first time. They are confronted by several of the prehistoric lizards, which, spoiler alert, is immediately before the introduction of Buck as a character. This is also where the next end-of-level cutscene picks up from. The player is finally introduced to Buck. He is certainly the character with a replacement voice actor who has the larger speaking role, but as previously stated, I do not find this to be off-putting. Buck is blessed to be able to interact with another rock statue other than Fast Tony, as the effigy of himself functions as a hint system for the player to guide them with where to go or what to do next.
You say I can use my wit to forage. Hey, now that's a thought.
As I tend to not require needing hints when playing this game, it is amusing to hear dialogue that is either new to me or that I haven't heard very much. The Trade Shack has a lot of new purchases to be made that are exclusively available for Buck. Immediately evident will be his ability to wield multiple types of ammunition, as well as the final fun items purchase titled Big Weapons. One can assume that Buck is quite a combat-focused character, though the beginning of this level is quite sparse of foes to fight. There is a large contrast between Sid as a playable character and Buck. The latter is far more speedy and acrobatic, with his vine to be used to interact with objects as well as a melee option in his fights. In addition to the vine being used as a lasso, Buck will also vault across large suspended rocks, spring up parallel vertical walls, scurry and slide along larger vines, and swing on horizontal tree branches. Don't try that last one in real life, the branch might break. Like Sid, Buck is able to redeem cherries from mushrooms and large ice blocks, as well as from the rock circles on the ground, which is still indicative of a place to ground pound for some apples, but these are about where the similarities end. As the player is proceeding through the level and picking up the first and second crystals along the way, it will not be long into the level until the player is introduced to the dangers which the Diesel Weasel is faced with in the underground world, dinosaurs. The path-blocking Triceratops can easily be dispatched of, but throughout the course of playing as this character, the player will have to pass several forced combat sections in which they must defeat all of the attacking dinosaurs, and sometimes hostile plant life as well. The first weapon is introduced to Buck as a way to make these combat sections a bit smoother, This is also where the last fun item is applicable, as Buck is the only character who can wield weapons. In the trade shack, the weapon is referred to as a spitting plant. Ammo refills are found on the ground along the sides of these combat arenas, and purchasing the upgrades to increase the capacity of the weapons means that they will not have to be refilled as often. The player is also introduced to the ability to execute combos with divine attacks, a list of which is accessible with the select button or your equivalent. The Trudon enemies are able to knock Buck to the ground and threaten to bite him, at which point a quick time event will begin where the player must mash the triangle button in order to repel its attack. All other dinosaurs will simply attack Buck directly, though Dilophosaurs have a spitting ranged attack owing to Jurassic Park. Buck is able to dodge roll this square while targeting enemies, and this is something that Sid is unable to do. Unique to this character only, an indication of a combo is visible as text on screen as the player executes consecutive hits on enemies. I do not know what the effect of this is, but it's nice to be encouraged. The second weapon is available partway through Buck's first level, near to where the last crystal is. They are lychees which explode upon impact, similar to grenades. The game refers to it in the trade shack as the bandolier extender. At the end of the level, Buck catches up with the herd in order to save them from some attacking dinosaurs, throwing a lychee as if it was a smoke bomb, which is not what lychees do in the game.
The name's Buck, short for Buckminster. Long for...
He instructs the animals to follow some tracks in order to find Sid, hopefully remaining alive, though he is not travelling along with them yet. Buck catches wind of the herd animals being in danger again and heads off in order to save them. So begins Flower Power, which has considerably more hostile plant life than the previous level. The Venus flytraps here will initiate a quick time event similar to the Trudon, although the event asks more of the player than repeatedly pressing a single button. After being introduced to the mechanic of vertical and horizontal wall running, as well as hopefully locating the first crystal, Buck is led to a clearing with a large tree which he must ascend the interior of. In order to aid with this, he finds the squirt plant, which is able to fire either water or tree sap continually. The required substance will always be made available near to where it must be used, and it has an upgraded capacity of 60, which will slowly drain as the player holds down the button. It is not used very often as it has no combat capability, though in this part of the level it will be used to water dried leaves so Buck is able to stand on them, and to rinse where the plant growths on a horizontal branch, preventing him from swinging on it. Once outside of the tree and after collecting the crystal to the left of the exit, Buck is going to encounter his first boss fight against a hive of hornets. The player is able to strafe to pick up more ammunition as they continue firing at the hive with the plant weapon, though the ammo refills only appear once the capacity is run down to 0. The second auto-scroller vine sliding section begins after a short bit of platforming, where the last crystal of the level can be found. The only other use of the square plant is required here. The orange sap will cover up poisonous gas being emitted, which is blocking the way forward. In this combat section, the player will be shown to the first boss fight against a dinosaur. There is little to do aside of continuing to land hits on it with lychees or the spitting plant. Ellie will somehow manage to find Buck while running through the jungle, and he is tasked with saving the cat and the big hairy thing from the carnivorous plant. The weasel leads the 3 possums to the clearing where the carnivorous plant is.
Rule number 23. Do not feed yourself to a carnivorous plant.
Buck, man, I don't like how high this roll counter is getting. Buck is required to wear away the defenses of this boss by clearing several rounds of plant enemies, each of which appear after the previous round has been cleared. For whatever reason, defeating these other plants within the arena are what reduces the health of the largest one, though I can understand that pulling its giant petals off will be quite damaging to it. The crystals within this level will appear and disappear across different rounds of this fight, and the player must remain vigilant about keeping an eye out for them to ensure that they collect all of them, although this is definitely easier with colossal crystals enabled. As for the fight, lychees deal a lot of damage and will reliably hit their targets if said targets are relatively stationary. The burrowing and flailing vines may require some more work than hitting circle, as they tend to thrash around and try to hit Buck directly if he is too close. Keeping enough distance between you and it will make them easier to hit with lychees or the spitting plant. Seed pods are situated around the base of a large plant itself. Although these will occasionally spit projectiles, they are stuck in place and therefore incredibly easy to hit. The game specifies that the player should use lychees for these. Attempting to use the spitting plant or the whip will be ineffective, and the character will remark as such. Buck will eventually be asked to damage the plant petals and tear them off of the plant with his lasso, and at this point the plant is going to shoot projectiles of its own to try and fend off its attacker. After all 5 petals are off, the plant will reveal 5 large flailing vines. all of which must be damaged enough in order to retreat back into the plant. The player will be awarded with apples each time for doing so. In the last phase of the fight, one of these flailing vines will remain, though it will momentarily affix itself to the ground, ensuring that Buck is able to enter the plant to defeat it once and for all. Before that, though, Buck is required to become Thanos Buck to provide some sort of barrier between the plant's acid and himself. If Buck takes too long, the vine will retreat back into the plant again, and another will extend out from it in a different place. The fight ends when Buck has entered the plant, provided that he is still covered in the necessary purple goop. With the herd reunited, they are still in the search for Sid, though now Buck is finally travelling with them. It will be a little while longer until we see these characters again, as now it is Scrat time once more. I don't understand why Scrat is so fussed about a single acorn, when there were hundreds and hundreds of them in the previous game.
And I ate the lot.
Scrat's Jungle Jive is the second of the 3 levels of this kind in the game, and it is, in many ways, very similar to the previous one. Scrat now has the ability, or the opportunity, to wall jump, ceiling climb, and to use pitcher plants as transport. All crystals in this level can be collected without activating any switches in the ground. Scratay is playable here when she was not in Nuts About Scratay. She can be utilised in order to clear a path for the boy squirrel because he is not able to glide on currents of air. Scrat can also clear paths for Scratay, of which will be fatal if a crossing is attempted otherwise. I never knew what those round things were supposed to be, but in the process of collating information for this video, I found out that chestnuts look quite similar. I just don't think Scrat is supposed to be that small. Though the chestnuts are much smaller in the Ice Age 2 game, things might just be different under the ice. Scratay leaves the level through an automatic cutscene, and Scrat must follow the path up to the same ledge now that the flow of air has been blocked off. Very briefly before the fade out, another upflow of air from the earth can be seen, and this is actually what is seen in the end of level cutscene. The version of Scrat's Jungle Jive seems slightly different here somehow. She runs off with the acorn. Buck begins listing off rules again, although now he is starting from 1 and counting sequentially. After listing the 3rd rule, he drops the title of the level and is promptly knocked off the cliff onto the ground below, instructing the herd to continue on to the Chasm of Death. I don't think this game has the Plates of Woe though. Also, Buck has a different Rule 3 in the movie. In this beginning area, several small predatory dinosaurs are present, as well as a large Pachycephalosaurus, referred to as a Pachyosaur. It can be brought down with the vine whip and mounted, providing Buck with a stomp attack to easily dispatch the dinosaurs, as well as a charge move to bust through breakable walls. The player is required to mount the Pachyosaur and break the walls, as the level cannot be continued without finding the path forward. Apples and cherries can be found behind all the dead-end alcoves, and the player will not be booted off their mount upon contacting with the rock, unlike when Sid is riding Carl or Frank. Continuing with the only path forwards, the music changes to indicate that this is a different area. Buck is required to do a wall run and jump from one side to the other, much like the beginning of Flower Power.
Watch as I do the wall run.
He will have to fight another hive of hornets, and there is nothing especially different about this to the previous instance in the tree stump of Flower Power. After this, he will be at the bottom of a circular vertical room, where a green gaseous substance is already ankle deep. The first crystal can be found here. No concern is brought to the gas until after Buck refills the squirt plant to hydrate a leaf. Once he reaches the first rock platform, then a timer will begin where the room begins, or continues, to fill with gas. It seems to act as a liquid though, where Buck must platform up and around the room, jumping across leaves and climbing along vines and up vertical walls, in order to escape the substance the room is being filled with. Upon reaching the top, the source of the poison is found, and Buck must get rid of the 6 plants that are causing it, as surely it will continue to rise and become inescapable as the way out cannot be cleared yet. There are 6 of these plants, and once they are destroyed, all of the gas will drain from the previous area, while the last of Buck's weapons appears on the ground at the back of the room. It is referred to by the trade shack as the spore plant or spore launcher, though I have always thought of it as a bamboo bazooka. A bambooka? Its maximum capacity is 10 mushrooms, and it is, bar none, the strongest means of attack in the game. There is a rock wall with flowers growing into it which the player is only able to clear after ridding the area of the plants and picking up the bazooka, as the flowers cannot be damaged by any other attack. After clearing the wall of rocks, the player has an opportunity to try out their fun new toy in a forced combat section with the Guanlong enemies, which do appear in the movie. One shot is all that is required to end the lives of each of the blue theropods, and it will not take long until the player is allowed to continue progressing through the level. A tree stump with water in it indicates mandatory usage of the squirt plant, and it indeed must be utilised again here so that Buck is able to swing on a branch. Buck is now overlooking the beginning part of the level, and he must traverse across it with the hanging rocks and lasso points to reach the cliff where the beginning of level cutscene took place, although the herd has moved on from this point by now. Another Triceratops is standing in the way, and Buck knocks it out with a lasso and a stalactite. But before this next combat section has concluded, Buck will have to fight a Triceratops, and is presumably the same one back for revenge. Armed with the bamboo bazooka, Buck will make quick work of the dinosaur with a three-horned face. I was unable to replicate it here, but in my childhood there was more than one instance in which the game froze when I was executing a combo near to the entrance of the small cave here, and I was required to restart the level. Perhaps that was also unexpected, and I did not expect it. Once the Triceratops is defeated, the Pachyosaur will reappear, as it is required to break a wall and obtain the second crystal of this level. For the second and third time in this level, Buck must then deal with plants and poisonous gas being emitted. Once that has been dealt with, a short bit of platforming and combat follows, where the final crystal can be obtained by ensuring that Buck switches directions on the horizontal branch before proceeding forwards, or else the player will have to backtrack. The end of the level is,
I think I'm going to enjoy this.
me too, Buck, but speedrunners certainly don't.
No, it's really bad level design here.
They do, however, like the music from the game and will sometimes play it throughout marathons. I certainly do appreciate that.
This is probably my favorite soundtrack in the whole game.
It's been living in my head for 15 years, more if we're including Ice Age 2's tunes as well. Buck reunites with the herd yet again. Now that they have met up and are on their way to continue to try to find Sid, we can finally return to what it is that Sid is doing. Like Run Sid Run, this level is a fixed perspective auto-scroller, more or less, though Sid is not facing the camera. Sid is required to defend the baby dinosaurs with a flower, which happens to shoot sap as projectiles, and which looks different from other projectile-firing plants which have been seen so far. Dinosaurs are approaching with the intention of harming the babies, as they will lose health points if the ravenous reptiles get past Sid and his defenses. The Dilophosaurs in particular are very clearly not aiming at Sid when they spit, so I don't know why they seem so intent on attacking others of their own kind. The music that plays here is from the first instance in Ice Age 2 where it is visibly nighttime, the first level of the aptly named Sloth Village. I believe that the sequence and location of all of the enemies here is fixed and does not change between different instances of playing this level. All crystals in this level are found by wearing down the health bar of large herbivorous dinosaurs which happen to cross the screen at certain intervals, and if the player does not manage to defeat it, the level must be replayed to get its crystal, as the game will autosave once the dinosaur has left the screen. Hits will be registered if the reticle is red or if a fired projectile hits the dinosaur, and the player is able to execute more hits in a shorter amount of time if they repeatedly press the fire button rather than holding it down. It never made sense to me how the sky in the background would suddenly become lighter, then dark, with the first hint of daylight appearing again as the final of the three boss dinosaurs is on screen. We return to Buck again. Flight of the Pterodactyl is a side-scroller similar to a Scrat level, although the Weasel and the Possums are never anything except airborne, nor are the Scrat levels also auto-scrollers like this one. There are many obstacles and enemies in this area, such as other pterodactyls and hornets, stalactites, lava geysers and lava projectiles, and yet another type of projectile-firing plant. This one is able to protect itself with its petals, although it is unable to attack while covered. As Crash and Eddie are along for the ride, they are able to fire at any of the enemies with a pea shooter and pick up temporary upgrades to modify the possum shooting patterns or directions. The three crystals can all be obtained in short succession within the lava caves. The level ends without much incident, the gang continuing to try and locate the missing sloth. The storytime cutscene at the start of Saving Sid is notable, as Ellie can be heard asking what Sid and Diego are doing, with their response being that they are telling a bedtime story to Peaches. The mama mammoth requests that it shouldn't be anything too scary, so that's fortunate that we're not in the part of the game where one of the storytellers nearly dies from falling off a lava waterfall. Oh wait. This is another auto-scroller pterodactyl level, although this is more akin to Star Fox than Super Mario. Crash and or Eddie even say the line. The aiming reticle is constantly on the screen, and there is nothing to do except to collect things that are beneficial and to shoot at things that are not. Some hanging fruits/vegetables on the ceiling will grant cherries, apples, pears, or strawberries upon being shot at, and collecting something yellow and glowy that looks a bit like a firefly in the corner of the screen can be picked up and used as a stronger ranged attack. The player should make sure to pick up the blue crystal as it appears, as this is a level that proceeds automatically, there is no way to go backwards. Eventually, the crew will find a large room with a hornet hive at the other end of it, blocking the way forwards. The player will be told about their ability to boost by pressing L1 and to do a loop or a U-turn with the triangle button and control stick, which is only applicable in areas of this level that are not narrow corridors. I do remember one time I played this game when I was younger, the texture of the walls failed to load in, so the room was pitch black except for the hive at the rear wall, It was kind of uncanny, not what I was expecting. After clearing the hive, a short bit more force flying will follow, where the path is blocked by vines and flowers. The player must destroy the flowers with a pea shooter attack, or else the crew will damage themselves on the thorny surfaces. The remaining 2 crystals can be picked up in this sequence, and before long, daylight can be seen, which indicates that the end of the tunnel and the end of this part of the level is near. In the following cutscene, Sid is finally found, being chased by Rudy, the large white baryonyx. The other animals are also being chased by other hostile pterodactyls, and the second part of this level is explained as a diversion to try and get the pursuer off their tails, 4 of them in total. Buck and the others are placed in a large open area with several centrally located stone pillars and lava falls bordering the area, still being chased by the enemy and still airborne on their own flying reptile. Immediately, the player is asked to shake off the pterosaur following them. Boosting or barrel rolls do not work here, only a U-turn will. The level itself requires the player to complete a specific number of different objectives, something we have not seen since baby-proofing. Another version difference arises here. The number of cloud rings, defeated pterosaurs, and enemy plants is 10 for each in the PS2 version, but in the 360 version, for some reason, the number goes up to 25 pterosaurs. I wonder if it has something to do with the hardware rendering that many enemies on screen, as combat sections would never have that many foes in one area at once, nor would the area that's loaded in or fenced off be quite this large. Also, in the 360 version, the frequency at which the U-turn must be performed to put distance between the gang and their follower seems to be greater. 2 more differences I must point out. The brachiosaurs that can be seen with their heads above the clouds are not included in the PS2 version, and neither are the piranhas which jump out of the water in the tunnel section. It's likely that the game has additional extremely minor and inconsequential version differences like this, but it is also the case that these are the only 2 versions I have played. The cloud rings are easy enough to see, but the enemy plants, it is what the game refers to them as, are in fixed locations around the rock structures and may require a few passes to get rid of all of them. There are more than 10 of the rings and plants available, and the remaining cloud rings disappear once the task has been completed, though the plants remain. The same fireflies and hanging fruits/vegetables are present here, as they were in the tunnel section of this level, though there are no crystals to be found. I have to wonder where it might be hidden if the third one was placed here, or how easy it would be to find on your own. I neglected to mention it until now, but the music that plays in the first part of this level is the same as Ice River from Ice Age 2. When I was much younger, I remember telling a friend in school, because I was having trouble with that level and finding the golden acorn at the end of it, that I hope the Ice Age 3 game doesn't have some sort of lava river level, where instead of Scrat, it's Sid. The next level and its ending cutscene is about the closest we ever get to a lava river level with Sid. I just like how the Ice River music plays in such close proximity to that. As for the theme that plays in the outdoor area, there are hints of this in both the beginning of level cutscene and the middle of level cutscene, but that one is exclusive to this game. I think it's neat. Though the previous level was called Saving Sid, Sid has not been saved just yet. He is still on the run from Rudy, and the level is practically a reskin of the time in which Mama was chasing him. Same as before, other animals, holes in the ground, spherical hazards dropped from the sky by flying enemies, and ponds with piranhas are the main obstacles here. As the level continues, it transitions from the lush forest into a lava area, which is quite the opposite of Flight of the Pterodactyl. Sid must then avoid the lava itself and the fireballs that are spat up from it. The crystals are all in the middle of the path, and Sid is still advised to dodge out of the way when the giant theropod decides to attack. The end of level cutscene features a modified version of the music from Sloth League 5, which I also mentioned all the way back at the end of Lonesome Sloth for being at the point in Ice Age 2 where Scrat must rescue Sid as he is being held up with ropes high above a volcano. What is it with Sid and lava? So, this is when the group with the pterodactyl finally arrives to rescue him.
This is how abandonment issues start.
Somehow, I don't think they do this every year. The herd's only goal now is to return back to their world above the ice. It is time for the final Scrat level, named Scrat's Tar Pit Trouble. What I find interesting is that, in the movie, Scrat's tar pit troubles are the reason for him falling to the ice in the first place. Why there is tar underground here is unclear to me, though it is not difficult to attribute these surface pools of bitumen to the real-life preservation of animals which lived in the Pleistocene. The natural history shoehorn aside, this level bears its own similarities to the previous 2 Scrat levels. Pitcher plants remain as an intended form of traversal, as does wall and ceiling climbing, sphere pushing, ground-poundable rock circles, and a short segment where control changes from Scrat to Scrate. 2 of the crystals can only be found by ground-pounding switches, both of which are only in the instances which Scrat is playable, meaning that the third is within Scrate's section. Like the end of Scrat's Jungle Jive, the end of cutscene music seems to be slightly different from the main level theme. That said, it's still a banger. The two scrat creatures decide to walk away from their acorn together, as it only serves to divide them. How nice. Now we have the final 2 levels of the game, both featuring nobody but Buck as a playable character. It is another instance of the beginning of level cutscene being fairly similar to a scene in the actual movie, but with the following gameplay not really making much sense canonically. Maybe this is the gas that's present in Expect the Unexpected, as they are both very dense and green. Buck says it isn't the funny kind, but the possums seem extremely amused by all this. The baby mammoth Peaches has now been born and is travelling along with the rest of the herd, though I'm not so sure when that happened. Like most other Buck levels, it is the standard fare of platforming and combat, though there is relatively little stable ground as the platforms will sink and the walls can't be held onto for long. The player must constantly be on the move, progressing onwards until they are able to rest again, at which point it is probable that they will soon have to fight more dinos. The first crystal can be collected in this beginning area. Hopefully the player will not be so focused on progressing that they forget about the collectibles. Regarding combat, we still have the bamboo bazooka, and it has been a while since that weapon got much use, though there is still another level after this.
Clever girl.
As of the time of writing, just last night, I found out that another of Buck's lines is intended as a movie reference,
I have the talent.
this one being Ghostbusters. The more you know. After the boss Ankylosaur, which can be dispatched with any weapon of the player's choosing now that they have every single one available to them, the squirt plant's sap must be used to cover up noxious gas. Platforming continues with a sliding vine segment immediately after a crawling vine segment, the appearances of which are changed to be more appropriate to this hostile, drier area. A second combat section where the boss Triceratops is next.
Nothing new to mention.
There's 115 cherries worth of pears and apples hidden behind some tarfals, which is quite neat. We press on and continue up several more climbable walls. Before hydrating the leaves though, it is worth paying attention to the conspicuous spine fragment and lasso point to the left of Buck. This leads to the second crystal of the level. Just past a few corners, Buck finds a room with a long sequence of bones and branches, which he is able to slide down. The same music plays as on the vine slides too. Stalactites will fall and break the path he is currently on if the player does not switch. At the end of this room, herein lies a surprise. Buck has a ball rolling section, the same as Sid's. As there is no snow in sight, all the player is tasked to do is to roll to the bottom of the tar pit. We must remember, however, that fall damage is easily taken here, even though Buck is not covertly transporting dinosaur eggs. There are no horizontal fallen trees though, but there is wind. Oh, the evil wind. The third crystal is available just before falling down a hole to reach the second part of the ball rolling section of the level. I always like the music here. It makes me sad that it only plays once and that the rest of the entire level of Grave Danger itself precedes it. I'd say the same for the last part of Egg Roll itself as well. Colossal Crystals absolutely helps here for picking up the last crystal, as some amount of precise timing is required to roll the rock there and return it back to an alcove stump before the wind starts blowing again. There is no wind in the lower part of this level, and instead of tilting sheets of ice on top of water, there are rocks or some other terrestrial solid surface, and yet more tar. It's bizarre that Buck has such a problem with heights here, as he tends towards being so acrobatic. There are briefly some Trudon enemies which Buck can run over, but nobody else is going to come at him rolling around on rocks of their own. A rolling rock. Now, the end of level cutscene here is interesting, because aside from it being a direct continuation of before the herd travelled back across the chasm of death, the aforementioned music that only plays at the last part of Egg Roll can be heard here. Surely this must be intentional, since we just finished the only other gameplay section of this sort, and this is making me think about the other one. How fascinating. I'm glad the game designers care so much about catering for people like me. It is time for the last level of the game. This culminates in a boss fight against Rudy. The herd is being confronted by the large Spinosaurid when Mama arrives to help fend him off. Buck is not allowed to be on the floor of the arena due to a kill plane or fall damage. He will instead contribute to the fight by causing pieces of the large stalactite or rock formation to crumble and damage the white baryonyx. Mama does not have any actual effect on the health bar. She'll get the participation award instead. The fight has two main pieces of music, the first of which is reused from Run Sid Run, which is in turn reused from Ice Age 2. The circular ring which Buck travels around can effectively be divided into thirds, with one crystal to be picked up in or after each, except for the first one. The central ceiling rock can only be damaged through the use of the spore launcher, and Buck must be careful to not get bitten by Rudy while he is firing at the flowers which hold the rocks together. The rock is prompted to fall with the lasso, and Rudy does not appear interested in attacking while this prompt is up. After the dinosaur has been damaged, the path forwards will clear due to additional disruptions and tremors, although none of the interstitial platforms or surfaces are particularly stable, Buck must keep moving from one to the next. The first crystal can be picked up in the second section of this fight, and once the second section is over, Rudy's revenge is audible. The de facto themes of the two giant dinosaurs duking it out below us being heard, one of which is repurposed, is certainly appropriate even though neither of them have played before while Buck was on screen. The second crystal is in the third section, and the fight continues as such, with Rudy's biting pattern changing slightly. It is not possible to lock onto the flower while the dinosaur is in the way, as the petals will cover the center if the player is not close enough. The last crystal of the 19 levels is in a short sliding section here, returning the player back to where they were at the beginning of the level. I see you've skipped quite a few rules, Buck.
Also, don't search for this dinosaur on certain places on the internet.
All in all, the fight has 6 sections. From the 4th section onwards, flowers to be shot at also change from being 3 smaller ones to, instead, 1 large one, although they are equivalent regarding the number of shroom shots needed to destroy them. During the 5th one, an altered version of Rudy's revenge is heard. Once the last hit has been dealt, the cutscene shows that Mama pushes Rudy off of the platform, and as the herd sans Buck is returning back to their world above the ice, the familiar water park theme plays. It feels like returning home for myself as well. After the last cutscene, the bedtime story is concluded even though it does not proceed another playable level. It does, however, happen before the credits of the game, where the comforting tunes of Scrat's Jungle Jive will play. There is still a little bit more to show off, however. No NG Plus as such exists. The player is not able to return to previous levels with weapons which are obtained in a later one, for instance. At least this game has a level selection that shows you which crystals have been collected, which doesn't require cheats to access, looking at UI Sage 2. Speaking of cheats, this game does have an option for them under the extras menu, although to the best of my knowledge, it was unknown as to what they were or what they unlocked until October of 2019 when a user named Niv reported their finding in the Ice Age 2 speedrunning server. Of course, I was there. As we have completed the game and obtained enough cherries to purchase the remaining crystals, the cheats are of little use to us. It is quite amusing that a code exists specifically to skip to the first Buck level, in case you can't stand playing as slow Sid and don't like how Scrat's gameplay is only ever side-on. Aside from crystals, cherries, and levels themselves, the main thing that these cheats would grant is the ability to unlock challenges before completing the level. There are 12 time trials across 10 levels of the game, as the 3 egg roll courses are counted separately. All of the others are either minigames or auto-scrollers of some sort, except for Scrat's 3 levels. They are also counted within these challenges. These are inconsequential in the PS2 version, but since the 360 has achievements, 12 time trials each have their own achievement. I've already gotten them all, and I don't remember the time limits being particularly stringent. The remaining achievements are not hard to get. They are automatic from completing levels in the game and from collecting all of the crystals. That is something we have yet to mention though. In the final level completed screen, 23 crystals are still missing. So where are they? Fast Tony has them. Purchasing 4 cyan, 4 purple, 5 yellow, 5 red, and 5 blue for 9,950 cherries will give the player the remaining crystals in the game, totaling up to 80. I did say that the amount was finite. So, what is the point of this recurring collectible, introduced to us from the very first cutscene? Why, bonus material of course. Under the same extras menu where the cheats entry screen is located, the player is able to view character models, concept art, and replay cutscenes, which are referred to as movies. The player can also listen to individual character voice lines, as well as the music tracks that play across the game. This is big, especially when you're someone who is so desperate to have Ice Age music on file that you opt to hold an MP3 player up to the CRT to record it even with background noise and talking. This is some actual audio of that. Outside of the concept art and potentially the voiceover player, nothing is here that we have not already seen in the game, except for another movie trailer, which, unlike the movie trailer that plays before the game, is actually from the movie. It has some of its audio changed out though, as I did watch the movie again to confirm things such as this. Those two are funny. Ice Age 3 also has minigames. I can't say I played them very much, or at all. If we wanted a party game on the PS2, we just go to Buzz Jr. Jungle Party. Bonus points to Dino Den for its prehistoric caveman theming relevant to this video. So, to show off this part of the game, I will play footage from the Frozen Caverns video review of the same game. There is not very much about these games that can't already be gleaned from first appearances, although I am wondering about what music might play during each minigame that the developers would deem thematically appropriate or fitting. The other merit I can see it having is that the environments where the minigames take place seem to resemble levels within the game, such as the Carl and Frank arena in Baby-Proofing, or the cave in Lonesome Sloth. Furthermore, new assets would have to be created for this woefully underutilized game mode if they are not already within the base game. I wonder what makes it worth the effort to do so. Finishing up with what it is I feel I want to mention, I was going to find footage for the Ice Age 3 console demo and I instead found a flash recreation of 2 of Scrat's levels. The level design bears no similarity to the actual game, and I can't get past the second of the jungle levels as I automatically die. However, a YouTube upload by the user FR0$TB!T3 can thankfully show me what I am missing. There isn't even any tar pit trouble, but I certainly do appreciate the music being the same. The gameplay demo is intended to advertise the game, which, to be fair, the Scrat levels are not an accurate depiction of what this game has to offer. Can also be properly seen in the YouTube upload, and these do not seem to be very different from how the actual gameplay looks. The same cannot be said for this pre-release trailer that is found on the store page for the Xbox 360 copy. I think it's interesting how the visuals and environments change during development. Still, I was intending on mentioning the actual Ice Age 3 free demo, also found on the Xbox 360 store. Nothing is accessible from the main menu except for a level select, and within that, the game contains portions of 3 levels, Egg Roll 2, Run Sid Run, and Buck to the Rescue. Crystals can be found within these levels in their normal locations, though no extras, fun items, or trade shacks can be found anywhere. Aside from that, the levels are really short, with Bugs cutting off immediately after the first combat section concludes. He does not even get his spitting plant. Another bonus video for the game would have been made available on the Xbox 360 store, though it was unavailable at the time of writing this. I managed to find a copy online, so now we are able to watch Josh Peck, the voice actor for Eddie, really play up the sorts of things that the all-new Ice Age 3 game has to offer, such as its 6 playable characters. Well, Ellie, who can't even play as. And as for Manny and Diego, they only have a few minutes of time in the spotlight apiece. The back cover of the box for the game also states that there are 6 playable characters. I took a look at this while editing it, and this top paragraph of words deadass looks like Skyrim text. The game wasn't even out in 2009. I'll also argue that the game is not, in fact, all new due to the reuse of Jim Croft's music. Nor do I think that the multiplayer mode will be a selling point for this game, but what do I know? I've never tried them.
Keep cool with the Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs video game this summer.
He's not entirely wrong because Christmas is during summertime here in Aussie land. So, why Ice Age 3? Well, I had already played the second game, and I was big into dinosaurs at the time, so I was looking forward to both the movie and the game even if I had to wait longer for the latter. I liked colouring in the colouring books, and I like collecting the McDonald's toys, as spoken by another character named Manny.
And then they could see the film, collect the stickers, play the Xbox game, eat the branded yogurts.
The reason for my enjoyment is realistically for little more than nostalgia, though I feel it important to mention that it is among the relics of a bygone era. Ice Age 1 did not have a console release, no matter how many times I might have asked the video rental place about it. Ice Age 4 was just a bunch of minigames, and Ice Age 5 does not even appear to have a console release. Scrat's Nutty Adventure seems to be a stand-in for Ice Age 5, though since it bears 0 similarities to the most recent movie in the franchise except for the title Ice Age, of which Scrat is virtually synonymous with, I fail to understand why it exists. Much to my dismay, it does not, in fact, reuse any of the music I like from Ice Age 2 and or 3, nor does Ice Age 4. This isn't a video about that, though. Movie tie-in games were a big part of my childhood when familiar cartoon characters were all I found appealing. I simply was not adventurous enough for Ratchet & Clank or Jack or Sly. The game being so short makes replaying it an effortless expenditure, and this is precisely why I've settled on it for my first ever video of this sort. I like talking about things that I like, and rather than doing so in 280 character posts, I can put it in a more permanent and palatable video form. Even as my editing skills are admittedly minimal, the intent was to create something that doesn't have lots of loud noises and flashy graphics, and I'm quite satisfied with what I have created. I hope that you were as well. Thank you for watching.